Ubbe Ragnarsson was not the peacemaker brother you saw on TV. He was the silent architect of the Great Heathen Army, the largest Viking invasion force that ever crossed the North Sea. While Ivar screamed and Bjorn hunted personal glory, Ubbe moved pieces on the board. And when the Saxons finally cornered him on a hill in the middle of nowhere in 878, he chose to attack in the darkness rather than die of thirst like a coward. Today you'll see how Ubbe planned the invasion of 4 English kingdoms in less than 10 years without leaving a trail of failure. You'll understand the role he played in the execution of King Aella, the man who threw his father into a pit of serpents, and you'll discover why he died alone, surrounded by hundreds of Saxons, holding the raven banner that his own sisters had woven. Autumn of 865, coast of East Anglia, 300 ships, maybe more. The Saxons never knew how to count properly. They only knew that the horizon had disappeared beneath black and red sails. The wind carried the smell of pitch, wet leather, and something worse, sharpened iron. Ubbe Ragnarsson stepped onto the beach alongside his brothers. Ivar, whose legs didn't work, but whose mind was a blade. Halfdan, who killed for pleasure. And him, the man who held everything together. The only one who knew how to transform rage into strategy. The Saxons thought it was just another Viking raid, quick plunder, winter retreat. They were wrong. Ubbe didn't come for gold. He came to collect blood, and he never left. Ubbe was born in the mud and blood of 9th century Scandinavia. Son of Ragnar Lothbrok and Aslaug, he grew up hearing stories of a father who killed dragons and kings with equal ease. But unlike Ivar, who inherited cruelty, or Bjorn, who inherited arrogance, Ubbe inherited something more dangerous: patience. From age 6, he held an axe. The iron was heavy. The rough wood tore skin from his hands. In winter, fingers froze around the handle, but he didn't let go. While other boys cried, Ubbe clenched his teeth and continued. Not because he liked it, because he knew that crying didn't kill enemies. Ragnar was rarely home. When he returned, he brought new scars and old stories. Ubbe watched in silence while his brothers screamed for attention. He learned early: whoever screams first loses control. Whoever waits wins. But it was Aslaug who shaped the monster. She was a seer, they said, saw the future in dreams and runes. One night, when Ubbe was 11, she pulled him outside the hall. Snow fell like ashes. She held his face with both hands, and her eyes were empty, distant. "You won't be the strongest," she said, "but you'll be the only one they follow when everything collapses." Ubbe never forgot, because 6 months later, the news arrived. Ragnar was dead, thrown into a pit full of serpents by order of King Aella of Northumbria. They say he sang while the vipers bit him, and that his last words were a promise: "My sons will come." It was at that moment that Ubbe realized something. Ivar wanted revenge. Bjorn wanted glory. Halfdan wanted blood. But Ubbe wanted something the Saxons could never understand. He wanted to destroy their world, slowly, completely, without leaving stone upon stone. If this story is impressing you, leave a like now and subscribe to the channel. Ubbe was 23 when he gathered his brothers. The table was covered with maps stolen from Saxon merchants, parchments stained with wine and dried blood. Ivar wanted to attack directly. Bjorn wanted to raid the coast and return rich. Halfdan just wanted to kill. Ubbe looked at each of them and said a single word: England. But what he didn't tell them was the real plan. For 3 years, he traveled through Scandinavia, door to door, hall to hall, not with war cries, but with cold, calculated promises. Land, gold, revenge. Each jarl he visited received exactly what they needed to hear, and each one swore loyalty not to Ragnar's sons, but specifically to Ubbe. In the summer of 865, 300 longships gathered on the coast of Denmark, the largest Viking army ever seen. Warriors from all of Scandinavia, each carrying axes, round shields, and an ancient hunger. But Ubbe had brought something none of them expected. Horses, hundreds of them. The Saxons fought on foot, slow, trapped behind their walls. Ubbe would chase them mounted, without rest, without mercy. When the ships touched the sand of East Anglia, King Edmund tried to negotiate. He offered gold, offered lands, offered peace. Ubbe accepted everything with a smile. 3 months later, Edmund understood his mistake. Ubbe attacked at dawn. Edmund was captured trying to flee, tied to a tree, while archers used him as a target. It wasn't cruelty, it was a message, but the real conquest was still to come. November 866. York, the capital of Northumbria, Aella's kingdom, the man who threw Ragnar to the serpents. The walls were Roman stone, the gates reinforced oak with iron. Inside, thousands of Saxons waited for the attack. Ubbe didn't attack, he simply sat outside and waited for winter to freeze the rivers, waited for the food to run out, waited for the Saxons to become desperate enough to open the gates. And in March 867, they opened. The battle lasted 4 hours. Blood ran down the Roman stones. Ubbe fought on the front line, axe in his right hand, advancing over bodies as the Saxons broke. When the gates fell, he was the first to enter. York was his. And in the center of the hall, chained like an animal, was King Aella. Ubbe looked into the eyes of the man who killed his father. And what happened next changed England's history forever. Aella was on his knees in the center of the hall. The chains creaked with every movement. He didn't beg, didn't cry, just looked at Ragnar's sons with the silent hatred of someone who knows they're going to die, but refuses to give the pleasure of humiliation. Ivar wanted to start immediately, but Ubbe raised his hand slowly. He said they dragged him outside the hall, to the middle of York Square, where everyone could see. Captured Saxons, victorious Vikings, terrified merchants, all witnesses. The sky was grey. The cold wind cut the skin. Aella was forced face down onto a flat stone, and then the blood eagle began. The axe cut Aella's back, opening the flesh from the base of the neck to the waist. The sound was wet, heavy, like wet wood cracking. He screamed, finally screamed. Ubbe didn't look away. They broke the ribs, one by one, tearing them from the spine with iron bars. Blood ran down the stones. Aella still breathed, his body trembling, muscles contracting, and then, with bare hands, they pulled out the lungs. The wings were exposed to the cold wind. Aella gasped, chest open, life draining slowly. They say he lived for entire minutes like that, eyes fixed on Ubbe. When he finally died, Ubbe spat on the body and turned his back, but revenge was just the beginning. In the following years, the Great Heathen Army crossed England like a black storm. Mercia fell in 874, the king fled, and Ubbe placed a puppet on the throne. Wessex was surrounded, pressured, suffocated. Alfred, the king of the West Saxons, was forced to hide in swamps like a cornered animal. Ubbe didn't need epic battles. He simply destroyed supplies, burned crops, killed horses, let the Saxons starve before attacking. It was efficient, it was brutal, and it worked. But there was one moment that revealed who Ubbe really was. Winter of 873, a Saxon town called Repton, in the heart of Mercia. The monks had barricaded themselves inside a stone church, praying their god would save them. Ubbe's men wanted to burn it down. Quick and simple. Ubbe had a different idea. He ordered his warriors to surround the church. No fire, no axes, just wait. For 3 days and 3 nights, the monks sang psalms inside, while the Vikings sat outside in the snow, sharpening their weapons, eating dried meat, laughing. On the 4th day, the singing stopped. When they finally broke down the door, they found 12 monks dead from thirst, collapsed over their prayers. The altar was covered in scratches where they tried to lick moisture from the stone. Ubbe walked through the bodies without expression. He picked up a silver cross from the floor, studied it for a moment, then crushed it under his boot. One of his men asked why he didn't just burn them. Ubbe's answer was simple. Fire is mercy. Thirst is lesson. That's when the Saxons understood. Ivar was brutal because he enjoyed pain. Bjorn was violent because he craved glory. But Ubbe was cruel because it was effective. He didn't kill for pleasure. He killed to teach fear, and fear, he knew, conquered more than axes ever could. After Repton, entire Saxon villages surrendered at the sight of his banners. They'd heard what he did to the monks. They'd heard that he preferred watching men die slowly over giving them a warrior's death. The monster wasn't the one who screamed. It was the one who smiled. killed while you suffered. But something changed. In 878, Ubbe separated from the main army. He took 23 ships to Devonshire in the far west. Nobody knows exactly why. Some say he wanted his own conquest, away from Ivar's shadow. Others say he heard of a treasure hidden in a monastery. What matters is that he took the Hrafnsmerki, the raven banner, woven by Ragnar's sisters, they said, imbued with Seder, ancient magic. If the embroidered raven flapped its wings in the wind, victory was guaranteed. If it remained still, death came. In the winter of 878, Ubbe besieged a Saxon fortress at Sinwit, on top of a hill. Inside, Ealdorman Odda and less than 1,000 men. Outside, 800 Vikings, hungry and tired from weeks of siege. The water had run out. Ubbe could wait for the Saxons to die of thirst, could retreat and seek reinforcements, but he had spent 13 years conquering England, and he wasn't going to die waiting. Dawn, complete darkness. Ubbe ordered the attack. The Vikings climbed the hill in silence, shields raised, the raven banner fluttering ahead. But Odda was waiting. The gates suddenly opened. The Saxons exploded outward, screaming, desperate, with the strength of men who had nothing to lose. Ubbe fought on the front line, axe against sword, shield against shield. Blood made the grass slippery. Bodies piled in heaps, and then, in the middle of chaos, someone screamed. The banner had fallen. Ubbe turned, saw the black and red fabric trampled in the mud, and in that second of distraction, a spear pierced his chest. He fell to his knees. Around him, his men broke. 800 Vikings dead or fleeing. The Hrafnsmerki captured by the Saxons as a trophy. Ubbe Ragnarsson died alone, on top of a forgotten hill, far from his brothers, far from glory. But as the blood drained, he saw something. The horizon. The England he had conquered, and he smiled, because even dying, he had succeeded. He had transformed rage into kingdoms. The news of Ubbe's death spread through England like fire in dry straw. The Saxons celebrated in churches, sang hymns of victory, raised the raven banner as proof that the Viking gods were false. But the Vikings didn't stop. Because Ubbe had done something no other Viking commander achieved, he had transformed raids into colonization. While others plundered and fled, he stayed, built, governed. When he died, half of England was already under Scandinavian control. The Danish law would dominate the island for generations. Cities like York, Nottingham, and Derby would become Viking centers, and even Alfred the Great, the only Saxon king who survived, spent the rest of his life fighting against the empire Ubbe helped build. Ubbe Ragnarsson was not the most famous of Ragnar's sons. He wasn't the most brutal like Ivar. He wasn't the most legendary like Bjorn, but he was the most dangerous. Because while the others sought glory, Ubbe built power. While the others screamed, he planned. And while the others died in epic battles against immense armies, he died conquering an entire kingdom. Today, when you watch movies and series about Vikings, you see the furious Ivar, the adventurous Bjorn, but you rarely see the man who actually changed history. The silent architect, the brutal strategist, the most dangerous son of Ragnar. If you want to know other warriors that history hid, subscribe to the channel now.